Eric someone at Canon?
Yes, he is.
Do you remember meeting Eric on the morning of the 25th of June 2014 and sorting out what arrangements would apply between Dick Smith and Canon in relation to June orders?
I don't specifically remember the meeting, no.
All right, well, could the operator please bring up DSE.061? I'm sorry, that's the wrong one. I'll start again. DSE.051.017.6806. And if we go to the bottom of the second page, this is actually an email from you. If you look at the bottom of the second page, Mr. Bonham, it's the next day, the 26th of June. It's you sending an email to Darren, D-A-R-R-I-N, Crook, C-R-O-O-K, with what has been agreed with Canon.
Yes.
So there's no doubt in your mind, is there, that you had met with someone from Canon and reached an agreement along these lines?
No doubt.
There are two deals that seem to have been reached. If you look at that page on the left-hand side of the screen, in relation to a $1.5 million order, you'd get your normal volume rebate, but as an O&A claim, and that would be 10.5%. Do you agree?
Yes.
And you get a normal O&A claim of 10%, so a total of 20.5% on the order.
That's correct for this particular agreement.
And in relation to $850,000 in photo orders for delivery in July but invoiced in June, you reached what I have to say looks to me like the same, in effect, the same arrangement.
That's correct, with additional payment terms.
With additional payment terms. So there's then a comment at the bottom that these orders are not directly linked to the conference commitment, but have certainly been part of our discussions. Can you explain what that means?
My recollection of this was the additional orders that were placed were used as leverage for Canon to commit to that level of support for the exchange conference.
Thank you. Could the operator please bring up DSE.003.047.3900? Here you have an email dated the 4th of August. As you've said before, this is in the period when you and your team were busy collecting evidence for auditors, is that right?
Yes.
You can see at the bottom of the page, Mr. Kavanagh has sent an email to, is it Luke Roche?
Yes, from Canon.
All right, from Canon, it's R-O-C-H-A-I-X, on the morning of the 4th of August, confirming the June advertising commitment. And he says to Luke, as you know, we placed some large orders in June. Could you please reconfirm the value of support totalling $442,574?
Yes.
You understood that was the total of the rebates on the two orders that you'd negotiated in late June?
Yeah, that would appear to be correct.
And then Mr. Roche has responded, hi Frank, I confirm that the below support of 442,574 was for marketing support, including over and under support. Do you see that?
Over and above support, yes.
Over and above support, I'm sorry. Now, do you have, and that email's copied to you, isn't it?
That's correct.
Do you have any idea how Mr. Roche knew to use those words, marketing support, including over and above support?
Because it became a standard expectation of suppliers under direction.
Yeah. But in this case, of course, it's not in the email he received from Mr. Roche. So is it fair to infer that either you or Mr. Kavanagh called Mr. Roche and told him to use those words?
Yeah, it's fair to assume that, and/or the supplier, without prompting, would have known that that was the expectation from previous discussions or instances.
But at some point, he must have been told
Yes.
that for internal Dick Smith reasons, he had to use that formula, and he's used it in this email.
That's correct.
And you would have known at the time, of course, that the 442,574 was not for marketing support, including over and above support.
It was for a combination of supports, yes.
On the, could the operator please bring up DSE.003.047.3428? You can see here that Mr. Roche is sending an email to Frank Kavanagh. He says, that's at the bottom of the page. He says, I found the original email from Eric outlining the brief for the June orders,
Yes.
which should give you the confirmation you require. From what I see for orders placed in June 14, there are 2 POs, and you can see them identified there.
Yes.
The 10% you're referring to on these 2 purchase orders would come to a total of $265,411.
So sorry, go.
Well, that's quite a different email to the email he sent on the 4th of August, isn't it?
Well, I'm assuming that that is referring to the 10% O&A confirmed as part of that overall deal, but obviously doesn't capture the treatment of the standard rebates as part of the deal, which was the 10.5.
Yes. Could the operator bring up DSE.086.096.9455, please? Now you can see from the bottom of the page, Mr. Bonham, there's an email from Mr. Sullivan to Mr. Hirsch and yourself.
Yes.
Copy to Mr. Potts, Mr. Freeman, and 2 others.
Yes.
And this was the tail end of Mr. Sullivan's effort to collect support in relation to the audit, wasn't it?
That's correct.
You are referred to in the first item in relation to Belkin, and I'll come back to that. But do you remember, don't you, Samsung being a platinum supporter of the exchange conference?
I don't remember specifically, but yes, that would make sense.
At this time, the phrase product training support tended to indicate support in relation to the exchange conference, didn't it?
That's likely, yes.
And do you remember ASA being a gold supporter?
The most...
Sorry, Mr. Bonham, not music. We'll just wait, maybe.
I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you again now, yes.
Yes.
So, Mr. Bonham, do you recall ASA being a gold expo exchange?
Samsung, Acer, HP, Toshiba, Norton, those brands, I would not have been part of those negotiations. I recall them all being in attendance at the exchange event, but what level of sponsorship level, I'm not sure.
All right. In any event, you understood at this time what Mr. Sullivan was seeking was support for various receivables from vendors to be shown to auditors. That's
correct.
And could the operator please bring up DSE.058.036.0367? I understand, Mr. Bonham, you were not involved directly in ASA, the ASA negotiation. But if you look at the bottom of the first page, you'll see that ASA on the 11th of June had confirmed its support of $150,000.
Yes.
And was it consistent with your understanding on the 6th of August 2014 that Mr. Sullivan's request was not for evidence of support? Because as you can see, when he sent that email, he had evidence of support from ASA. But for evidence, whether or not evidence of support already existed, something he could show to the auditors.
It was for a specific terminology to be used for the auditors, yes.
And it was whether or not evidence of the receivable already existed in an email from the relevant vendor in some different form.
That didn't appear to be the question, no. It's clear that that did exist.
The one you were responsible for was Belkin, wasn't it?
Yes.
And you interpreted that request as an instruction to go and get the required support from Belkin, whether or not it was a fair reflection of the nature of the commercial arrangements between Belkin and Dick Smith. Is that correct? I think you responded, but we didn't hear.
Yes, that's correct.
Could the operator bring up DSE.057.009.7333, please? Now, you understood, didn't you, Mr. Bonham, that the arrangement with Belkin in June 2014 was that the existing terms of trade were waived and Dick Smith agreed to take its rebate entitlement as an O&A rebate in June 2014?
I don't recall specifically. Is that outlined in this email?
No, I'll bring another one up. DSE.051.017.9617.
I do recall this, yes.
Similar to the arrangement you'd reached with Canon, you'd agreed with Belkin not to charge terms of trade, but to claim it as an O&A rebate.
That's correct.
And could the operator then bring up DSE.051 016.3889 you'll see your top email is the 5th of August. As at the 5th of August, you were asking Kimberley from Belkin to help you clear up a variance between Dick Smith's records and Belkin's records as to the amount of that rebate, weren't you?
That's correct.
And you can see that the calculations are in the Belkin email at the bottom of that page. And notwithstanding the agreement that had been reached, it's still being, the quantum of the rebate still being calculated in accordance with the trading terms.
That's correct.
And then following, I'll withdraw that. Could the operator bring up DSE.057.009.7333? This is an email from Mr. Freeman. It didn't come to you, Mr. Bonham, but that figure of 287,700 that Mr. Freeman refers to in his email,
Yes.
that's from Mr. Sullivan's email that you've seen, chasing for support.
That's correct.
Were you aware at the time that Mr. Freeman didn't understand how the $287,700 was calculated?
Well, based on this email, yeah, it appears to be a reconciliation difference between Darren's understanding of that and Michael Sullivan's.
But is it likely that at the time this occurred, even if you don't remember it now, at the time it occurred, you were aware that there was some confusion about the amount?
There are regularly confusions about these amounts.
It's likely, though, that Mr. Freeman will have told you at some point that...
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And could the operator please bring up DSE.051.016.3312? And you can see there, Mr. Bonham, at the bottom of the page, Mr. Sullivan's email to you asking you to get support.
Yes.
You've forwarded it on, haven't you, to Kimberley Freeman at Belkin?
That's correct.
And she's given the required response at the top of the page.
That's correct.
It's likely, isn't it, that you spoke to her between the time you forwarded the email and her response?
Yes, it's likely.
Because she had to know what to do. It's not clear at all from you forwarding the email what you expect of her.
Yeah, it's likely I spoke with her.
And in addition, of course, you had no reason to think that the number 287,700 was any reflection of the actual arrangement between Dick Smith and Belkin at the time, did you?
No.
I mean, just the day before, on the 5th of August, you'd been writing I might be wrong about that. Canon, is it? I'll withdraw that. It was the day before. Yeah, because of course it was just the day before that you were debating with Belkin about what the precise amount was calculated in accordance with the trading terms.
That's
Correct?
Yes.
And no one in that correspondence was suggesting that the outstanding amount was 287,700, were they?
It doesn't appear to be the case, no.
And of course, you were aware that the outstanding amount didn't all relate to marketing support.
Correct.
longer interested in doing it because we've got that. Could the operator please bring up DSE.080.157.8777? Now, Mr. Bonham, do you remember? Have a look at this email. Do you remember after the June audit, in preparation for the half year 15, Mr. Sullivan gave an instruction that support should be obtained from all vendors for O&A rebates, and that it should reference promotional activity or promotional support and the relevant month?
Yes, I do remember that.
And do you remember that it was also a requirement that the support be available before the end of December 2014?
Where possible, yeah.
What was your understanding of the instruction to reference promotional activity or promotional support on all O&A claims?
We were educated and instructed that O&A claims that were termed or classified as promotional activity and or promotional support could be recognised or taken into account at the time that the claim was raised, as opposed to other forms of rebates or O&A support that were termed differently, needed to be taken into account at the time the product was sold. So we were educated at a point in time around the importance of all O&A being deemed as for promotional support, irrespective.
And who did the educating?
The education came from a number of the senior leadership. So from Nick Abood, John Skellen, many of the directors, Michael Potts, Michael Sullivan. It was widely talked about at a point in time. There was a change in behaviour.
Now, I want to focus specifically on the period up to December 2014. Do you remember a meeting at which those instructions were given to you?
I don't remember a specific meeting, but I do remember those instructions being specifically given. But what meeting or forum that was in, I do not recall. I was in lots of meetings.
And you yourself, did you pass those instructions on to your buying team?
I would have, yes.
And to the best of your knowledge, other merchandise managers were passing the instructions on to their buying teams? Did you answer yes to that?
Yeah, that's correct.
Was Mr. Mills involved in giving the education or giving the instruction?
I don't recall Nigel Mills being so much part of the education or instruction as opposed to sort of being a key stakeholder in the administration and reconciliation.
You understood, didn't you, that it was mainly Mr. Mills who was reconciling the information that was collected by buyers with the financial records of the company?
That's correct.
And it was mainly Mr. Mills who was dealing with the auditors during the audit? Did you know that?
Oh, not specifically. My understanding is many of Dick Smith's team members would have been dealing with the auditors, but yeah, it would sound logical that Nigel in his position would be a key contact.
Need to do that one as well. Could the operator bring up DSE.059.013.6778? Now you can see at the top there, Mr. Hirsch has forwarded an email to office buyers. Who would be, they're the buyers in the office group, are they?
They are the buyers that reported to Greg Hirsch. So his category of products was called office products.
And you can see below he's forwarded the Mr. Sullivan's email.
Yes, that's correct.
Could the operator bring up, please, DSE.003.052.0002? Here's an email from Lily Zong. Now, this email was, we can go back if you like, Mr. Bonham, but this email was attached to the last email I showed you. Did you become aware that someone had created an O&A tracker?
Look, there were various O&A trackers used during my time at Dick Smith. So yes, I was aware of different trackers and different methods to track O&A during the 3 years I was at Dick Smith.
And did you become aware that after the experience of the June 14 audit, effort was put into improving the O&A trackers that were available to buyers?
Yes.
And could the operator bring up, please, the attachment to this document, which I think is DSE. There it is. So was this the form of O&A tracker that became available to buyers at the end of 2014?
This does not look familiar to me, but this particular tracker is for a buyer from Dick Smith. It doesn't look familiar in terms of it's a tool that would have been used by the buyer as opposed to maybe a tool that was used by the finance team to track O&A for each buyer. I don't recall this being used by my buyers.
All right. You know that some rebates, but by the end of 2014, some rebates were being recorded on Profectus.
Yes, my memory of Profectus is it was a new platform that was brought in to assist with the management of O&A.
Well, Profectus came online towards the end of 2014, didn't it?
That sounds about right, yes.
And do you remember that there was, even after then, a difficulty reconciling over and above rebates or some over and above rebates on the Profectus platform?
My recollection of reconciliation of O&A rebates during my whole time at Dick Smith was that there was complexity and challenges.
Could the operator bring up DSE.018.011.5743, please? Here you have an email, Mr. Bonham, dated the 5th of January 2015. It's forwarding an email from Toma Bar Amy, which was copied to you. Can you see that?
Yes.
And you understood, didn't you, that during the HY15 review conducted by the auditors, there was instructions given by the company to buyers to collect evidence to support their O&A rebates?
That's correct.
And you can see at the bottom last paragraph of that email before the table that the instruction was to state the period of the claim and that the wording must not relate to an order, but the promotional activity was okay.
That's correct.
And did you understand that that was an instruction to collect support for all of the rebates referenced on this table, if the operator could scroll down, we could see them, that reference promotional support.
That's correct, yes.
Although you can see just by looking at the table that many of them were order related.
Yes, that's correct.
Could the operator bring up, please, DSE.121.011.4737? You can see that this is an email, the 3rd of July 2015, from Sashin, S-A-S-H-I-N, and then the last name is P-O-K-H-A-R-E-L.
Yes.
You're on you're in one of those groups that received this email, I think, weren't you, Mr. Bonham? Merchandise.
Oh, CC, yes.
You were CC'd, yeah.
Yes.
You can see that there are the email. I'm sorry, withdraw that. Who is Mr. or Ms. Pockerell?
Sashin Pockerell worked in the finance and administration team.
And you can see that he has attached 1392 account reconciliations.
Yes.
To this email. Could the operator bring up the attachment? So what you can see here, Mr. Bonham, is the front page of the 1392 account reconciliations.
Yes.
And you recognise, don't you, that that's a summary of BM accounts and their respective buyers?
That's correct.
And did you understand that the BM account 68 related to Tianjin?
It relates to private label, I believe.
All right. Could the operator...
Tianjin was a private label.
You understood it related to the private label suppliers?
That's correct.
Could the operator go to the tab at the bottom, which is BM 68? Yeah. In your last answer, Mr. Bonham, you said, didn't you, that Tianjin was a private label supplier?
Of accessories, that's correct.
And does this format for the reconciliation of BM accounts in 1392, is that familiar to you?
Yeah, it's not something I would have much personally, but I'm familiar with that, yeah.
Is this the tool that was used by finance that you were referring to earlier?
It was a tool that was used by by finance and the business suppliers to reconcile their claims.
All right. Could the operator bring up, please, DSE.092.076.9464? And could we start by going across to page 9465? You can see down the bottom of the page, Mr. Bonham, there's an email from you to Karen Franco.
Yes.
This is the finalised buy we've completed of factory specials.
Yes.
And then you say buy prices have been inflated significantly to achieve O&A outcome.
Yes.
That was the arrangement you reached with the Tianjin supplier at that time, wasn't it?
Can I just be really clear on this, that the arrangement with Tianjin was reached by David Baxter, who was responsible for procurement of private label products. It didn't sit specifically under my remit. So the deal was negotiated by David, as indicated in that email. But because the products were sold within the categories that I was responsible for, I was providing that information to the category buyer that reported to me.
All right, thank you. Could the operator bring up, please, DSE.083.430.8969? You're on the top email, Mr. Bonham. I want to draw your attention to the one in the middle of the page from Carolina Smith saying, "Hi, Chris." It was your understanding, wasn't it, that the arrangement that was reached with Tianjin in the middle of December 2014 would attract significant marketing funds?
My understanding is that, yes, significant. My understanding is that the standard pricing on this deal was going to be uplifted by 60%, and there was millions of dollars of marketing funds, or O&A, that would be booked as a result.
So that reference to marketing funds you understood to mean O&A rebate created by uplifting the price?
Absolutely.
And if we go over then to DSE.091.059.6341, you can see a purchase order there from the 15th of December 2014, can't you?
Yes.
This is the purchase order you refer to specifically in your affidavit in paragraph 16.
Yes.
Isn't it? Yes. And your evidence is that the prices shown on this purchase order were uplifted by 60%.
That's correct.
So the way the purchase order works is, you can see from the left-hand side, there's a catalogue number, a description of the item, a per unit price, quantity, and then a per unit price, and then the extension is the quantity multiplied by the price, correct?
Correct. So
the way the arrangement worked, as you understood it, was that the uplifted price was inherent in the purchase order.
That's correct.
There was never a document created, to the best of your knowledge, by Dick Smith in placing a purchase order, or by Tianjin in issuing an invoice, that separated out that part of the price that reflected the inflation.
Not that I'm aware of, but there would have been a subsequent claim raised for the difference by way of O&A.
Yes. You'd been involved in setting up arrangements like this before, hadn't you, internally at Dick Smith?
Not really, no. Not like this.
Well, you did a similar arrangement with ZAGG, Z-A-G-G, didn't you?
Well, I guess technically, yes. Where I think that's slightly different is that was a new range of products that we set up the structure of, I guess, the terms with that vendor across rebates, marketing support, pricing, that enabled a small fighting fund that could be called upon for use as part of that partnership. So I think this is a little bit different in that this was product that was specifically procured, which is not part of a ranging strategy, and increased by 60%. I think it's a little bit different. Technically, it's the same, yes.
The structure is the same. You think differently,
Yes.
differently motivated.
Yes.
And you'd done the same structure, hadn't you, with Belkin?
As ZAG, yes.
And you'd used the same structure, you'd set up the same structure internally yourself with Jackson Industries.
That's
Do you remember, I'll withdraw that, could the operator bring up DSE.074.031.9729? Do you remember that in March of 2015, so about 4 months after that purchase order, the arrangement between Dick Smith and Tianjin was put into a written agreement?
I don't, because I was not responsible for managing relationships or negotiations with Chinese vendors.
All right. If you look at the second page of the document, which is on the right-hand side, and assuming this is an agreement between those two entities on the dated in March 2015, do you know whether or not there was an advertising rebate of 50%?
Well, that would align back to the uplifting of prices across Chinese procured Dick Smith private brand products. So I was aware that this was put in place, yes.
Yes, but your understanding of what the 50% is that's a reference to the claiming back of a price uplift.
That's correct.
Could the operator bring up, please, MGT.002.151.4903? Now, Mr. Bonham, who was Tony Abdel Ahad, ABDELAHAD?
So he worked within the international sourcing team. So he, again, would have been one of the individuals responsible for managing the relationships with Chinese vendors and the procurement of stock with Chinese vendors. He was based in Hong Kong for a period of time, heading up the sourcing office.
Do you remember in the middle of 2015, the instruction within the company was the same as you've related it was the year earlier, that is to collect support to be given to the auditors that referenced promotional support, irrespective of the true nature of the rebate?
Yes.
Do you have any explanation, and I appreciate you're not directly involved in this, but are you able to explain from your own observation at the time what the reference is in the first email in that chain from Frank Yu of Tianjin to Tony Abdel Ahad confirming promotional support?
So can you repeat that question?
Do you understand what is being referred to in that first email from Frank Yu to Tony Abdel Ahad? It's the email, I'm sorry, Mr. Bonham, it's the email on the top of the left-hand page that you can see on the screen. It's an email dated the 21st of July 2015 at 11:32 a.m.
Yeah, this appears to be an example of someone from Dick Smith obtaining documentation from a supplier referencing promotional or marketing support to support claims that have been raised.
Could the operator return, please, to DSE.091.059.6341? This again, Mr. Bonham, is the purchase order that you refer to in paragraph 16 of your affidavit?
Yes.
And you've said in paragraph 19 of your affidavit, the products in this purchase order were not of a high quality and you only ordered them because of the O&A rebate and because you were told to. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
So you're aware, aren't you, that the company maintained an obsolescence calculator, which was eventually known as the revised obsolescence methodology, and it was a spreadsheet? Were you familiar with that?
I was familiar with the company retaining an obsolescence provision that we use from time to time.
And you were familiar, were you, with AS 400?
Yes.
Could the operator bring up DS? I don't know if there's any way of leaving the purchase order on the screen. There may not be. I'm sorry, I withdraw that. While we're on the purchase order, the specific example that you refer to in your affidavit when discussing the goods that were subject to this purchase order is item PW8230, which I think we'll find on the next page of the purchase order. Or keep going. There it is. You've made specific reference to that, haven't you? PW8230?
In the affidavit?
Yes, I think so,
Yes.
Mr. Ron.
Yeah, that's correct. Yep.
Could the operator, leaving that page of the purchase order open, if it's possible, bring up DSE.000855493? I'm told there are no dots in that. It's just DSE dot and then a 9 digits. 000855493.
The largest spreadsheet will take a little while to load.
I apologise to the operator, but it might be necessary to get rid of the purchase order in order we can see the spreadsheet properly. Now, if the operator could go to the yellow tab at the bottom, that's the AUS tab. And I think the easiest thing to do is conduct a search for the code PW8230. And then highlight that row if possible. You see there now highlighted on the screen, this is from the obsolescence calculation in December 15, so a year after the this is from the obsolescence calculation from December 15, so a year after the purchase order was placed. You could accept that, Mr. Bonham?
Yes.
And there is item PW8230, which is your HDMI 1.5 metre cable. You can see that, correct?
Yes.
It's now classified end of life, and it has been, it seems, for 38 days.
Yes.
There are 332 units left on hand, aren't there?
That's what this indicates, yes.
You remember that the order you placed a year earlier was for 3,200?
The order that Dick Smith placed, yes.
That's right, that Dick Smith placed. Can you see that the stock age is 4 months?
Yes.
That indicates to you, doesn't it, that the product was last reordered 4 months earlier?
Yeah, my understanding is that the aging refreshed when the new order was purchased.
So the stock that you bought a year earlier has been reordered in the interim, hasn't it, at least once?
So, yes.
The month's cover is 1 month, it seems. Do you see that?
Yes.
And you can see, can't you, that the value of the stock that's been sold over the previous 13 weeks is $4,924.82.
Yes.
See that from... All right, could the operator scroll to the right, please? Can you see that there's a scan rebate of $7.90 on this item?
I can.
Would it be consistent with your understanding that that reflects the uplift?
I couldn't confirm that. I haven't seen this spreadsheet before.
No, that's all right. But you can see just mathematically, can't you, that the scan rebate is the mathematical difference between the unit cost and the net unit cost that appear in the next two columns.
Yes.
Yeah, just
The witness just said he hasn't seen the spreadsheet before, and so ask him about how the maths works. My respectful submission is not going to assist you on it.
Your Honour's not going to take this witness's evidence on how the maths works, obviously, for the maths, but I am taking him to the document so I can put a proposition.
You continue, Mr. Brown.
We just have the row highlighted again. It's row 11030. Thank you. And you can see, can't you, that the 13-week second margin is just under 19%.
Yes.
And the current sales second margin, which I ask you to assume is the second margin without the scan rebate included, is almost 500%.
That's correct.
I want to put it to you, Mr. Bonham, that the product that you identified in your affidavit as being a good example of a purchase order that was only made because of O&A rebates and which was poor stock, was still selling well on 1 month's cover 12 months later, and was still being reordered by the company and was still showing a good gross, a good second margin. Do you agree with that?
Well, not necessarily. Obviously, all of the product that's sold in that period, I'd actually probably rather seek clarification on how you'd be making 499% margin on a product. That looks like that scan rebates are being applied against that price to inflate the margin.
Well, you can accept that the mathematics is that the 19% margin is the margin without the scan rebate.
Yeah, so just
and the 500
to be clear on a product like that, standard margins would be about 65 to 70%. So obviously the margin being made was only 18%. So it was either being discounted or that was due to the price uplift. But it looks like it's had additional support applied to it from the provision, which takes it above its normal margin of about 65 to 70%, up to nearly 500%.
Just can we go back to the left-hand side, please, because you can see sales. So you can see the current sale price in column J is $27.26.
Yeah, so it's been discounted. That product would probably normally sell for about $50.
All right, but it had been purchased, hadn't it, 12 months earlier for $5.45 each, and that itself was a price that was uplifted by 60% on your evidence.
It said it was purchased 12 months earlier. There's some earlier evidence to suggest that there had been purchases in the interim.
Well, I didn't mean to suggest there hadn't been, but Mr. Bonham, this is the product, isn't it, that you give evidence had been purchased 12 months earlier for a price of $5.45.
That's correct.
Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And your evidence is that even that price of $5.45 is itself artificially inflated by 60%. Correct?
I'm just reading that section of my affidavit.
So the prices I've obtained from the purchase order, I can show you the purchase order again. Could the operator bring up DSE.091.059.6341 at page 6344? Oh, thank you. Done it. So there's the price, $5.45 each.
Yes.
Which is the price you say was inflated by 60%, correct?
I can't see in paragraph 18 of my affidavit where I specifically say that product was inflated.
No, well, to be fair to you, I don't think you do say that specifically. Your evidence is that your evidence to me earlier was that these were all inflated prices.
That's correct.
So you accept that the $5.45 is an inflated price?
Yeah. Yes.
Well, it doesn't really speak of bad stock, does it, Mr. Bonham, that 12 months later it was selling for $27 a unit and that the company was holding only 1 month's cover of the product?
I don't think you can draw that conclusion by looking at one piece of information 12 months later. A lot of pain could have been borne between 12 months ago and that point in terms of clearing that stock.
All right.
My position was that it wasn't a wise purchase at that point in time.
Well, we could separately search each of the numbers in the purchase order, but we won't do that. Rather, could the operator bring up AID.060.002.0001? Now,
yeah. Sorry, the other point I didn't note, which I've just noted now, that obsolescence provision is dated the 4th of January 2016.
yes.
I'd left Dick Smith a couple of months prior to that. So what happened in that couple of months in terms of managing that particular SKU, I'm not aware of.
All right. Now, what someone instructing me has done, Mr. Bonham, is extracted each of the rows for each of the products in your purchase order that you refer to in your affidavit from the spreadsheet you've last seen. And you can, if the operator can scroll down the page, if you keep your eye, Mr. Bonham, operator, we can stay there. You can see that column F is days in the current status.
Was it days? Yep. That's just the classification of the SKU, yep.
That's right. And then the month's cover is column I. And if you scroll down month's cover, you can see that with a couple of exceptions, all the products that you'd purchased 12 months earlier have single-digit months cover, and some of them only 1 or 2. Then if you look down column K, you'll see the age of the stock. And you'd agree with me, wouldn't you, Mr. Bonham, that just about all of the stock in that purchase order has been repurchased at least once since the purchase order you placed 12 months earlier?
Yes, so yes.
If I put to you, Mr. Bonham, that in circumstances where the average month's cover on this list, I'll ask you to assume was 4.6, and the average age is 4.5 months. And the average, if we scroll across to the right, we can see the margins. You see that there again is the 13-week second margin and the current sales second margin.
Yes.
I ask you to assume, Mr. Bonham, that the average of the first column is 48%, so that the products you'd purchased a year earlier for O&A support were selling a year later on average at a margin of 48%. And the current sales second margin, which is that second column, removing the scan support, the average margin is 406%. Now, Mr. Bonham, in light of that additional information, and I accept you didn't know it when you made your affidavit, you don't adhere, do you, to the comment that that stock wasn't good stock?
Yes, I do. At the time that product was purchased, the quantities that were purchased and the type of product that was purchased, I didn't believe was a good purchase.
You didn't believe the company could sell it through at a profit?
I didn't.
Is that what you mean?
No, probably that the company couldn't buy that product and operate within, the team wouldn't operate within the KPIs we've discussed over the last day or so.
But if you, it might be that was your genuine and reasonably held view, Mr. Bonham, but doesn't it now turn out you were wrong?
I don't believe so. Without getting back into a mathematics lesson, something doesn't appear right here. It's not generally possible to make 400% and 500% margins on products. So this seems like something was done to address that problematic stock by using provisions or other things. So yeah, this started, and this was taken at a snapshot a couple of months after I've left the business. So it doesn't change my opinion.
All right, nothing further. Thank you, Your Honour.
Yes. Any re-examination?
No, Your Honour.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Bonham. You're excused.
Okay, thank you.
You may disconnect.
Right, thank you very much.
Just one matter that arises, Your Honour. I think the protocol is that documents that are referred to automatically go into evidence.
Yes, unless there's an objection.
That most recent document, I gather, was prepared for the purpose of these proceedings.
Yeah, it's just an aide memoir. I mean, it is.
So
I accept it's not evidence.
Anyway, so the last document should just be marked for identification.
thank you, Your Honour. That's what I was going to ask.
Well, it is marked. I mean, it's got a number on it that I've read out of the transcript.
Just so long as it's clear that it's not in evidence.
Yes. All right. Well, that's clear.
Thank you. So we've notified the parties that we're not proposing to call Mr. Keane.
Yes.
And that leaves Mr. Mastoris. He is available at 10 o'clock in the morning. He's in Melbourne, and we have all the equipment set up and ready to go at 10 o'clock tomorrow.
Yes.
I don't think there's anything further we can do today. And he will be my last lay witness.
Yes. So the upshot is I should adjourn until 10 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Please, Court.
Yes.
So can I just ask one
yes.
question? Your Honour, I have no interest in this
Storis. Will we go directly into the defendant's openings once Mr. Storis finishes, or would Your Honour propose just stay with the timetable, so to speak, and have that starting on the following day?
Well, I hadn't turned my mind to it, is the answer to the question.
Well, Your Honour, if I could be heard, I'd strongly prefer the following day. But Your Honour will recall that Your Honour's already indicated that Mr. Abood will not be called before Tuesday.
Yes.
And so there won't be any time lost.
Yes.
If we open on Thursday.
I wasn't trying to jam anyone up. I had just much more selfish reasons when I turned up to court.
You can proceed on the basis that Mr. Abood's and Mr. Potts' opening won't be tomorrow.
May it please.
I'll adjourn until 10 o'clock tomorrow.